The call came through at 11:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had been staring at my phone for the past hour, watching the minutes tick by, telling myself they were just running late. Traffic. Parking. My mother never could find parking downtown. Hey, we're not gonna make it. That was it. No build-up. No build-up. No apology hiding somewhere in the words. Just that, flat and simple, like she was canceling a hair appointment. I was standing outside the auditorium in my nursing pinning ceremony gown, white fabric, a little gold pin in a velvet box tucked in my pocket, and I said, "Mom, it starts in 15 minutes. She said, "I know, honey, but your brother's thing ran long and we're still out in Riverside and you know how your father's back is." I stopped listening somewhere around Riverside. Because Riverside is 40 miles away, which means they left for my brother's thing, his thing, which was a backyard cookout, a Sunday afternoon cookout he throws every few weeks because he likes to call himself a pitmaster. They left for that before they were ever planning to come to mine. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said, "Okay," and I hung up. The woman standing next to me outside those auditorium doors was a classmate I'd barely spoken to, a quiet woman named Rosa who always sat 2 rows ahead of me and brought homemade tamales to every study session. She looked over and said, "You okay?" I said, "My family's not coming." She didn't say, "Oh, that's terrible," or "I'm so sorry." She just looped her arm through mine and said, "Then you walk in with me." I don't know why that undid me more than my mother's voice did. I had to breathe through my nose for a solid 10 seconds before I could move my feet. Here's what you need to understand about how I grew up. Because none of what comes later makes sense without it. My brother. I'll call him my brother because that's what he is. Biologically, though most days it felt more like a title than a relationship, is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one my parents pointed to when they talked about their hopes. He was going to take over my father's landscaping business. He was going to get married young, have kids young, stay close. He was the blueprint. I was the deviation. I wanted to be a nurse since I was 9 years old. Since the summer my grandmother was in the hospital and I watched the nurses move through that ward like they owned something no one else did. This quiet authority, this knowledge of exactly what to do when everything felt like it was falling apart, I wanted that. I told my mother and she smiled the way you smile at a kid who says they want to be an astronaut. Sweetly. Without belief. My father paid for my brother's truck when he turned 18. He co-signed on my brother's first apartment. When my brother's landscaping side business started, my father handed him his client list. When I got into the nursing program at the university, my mother said, "That's a lot of school. Are you sure?" I paid for it myself. Loans, work-study, weekend shifts at a grocery store until my hands smelled like the deli counter even after 3 washes. I did not ask them for help because I already knew the shape of the answer I'd get. 4 years. That's how long it took. And on the day I finished, the day I stood in that gown and received that pin and became, officially, a licensed registered nurse, they were in Riverside eating my brother's brisket. I walked across that stage. Rosa cheered loud enough for an entire section. Afterward, we went out for dinner. The whole cohort, and someone ordered a bottle of cheap champagne, and everyone toasted to each other, and I sat in that restaurant booth and felt 2 things at once, genuinely happy. In the way that you can feel happy when something real and hard-won is finally yours, and so tired of trying to make people see me that I wasn't sure I had any of that energy left. My phone buzzed around 9 that night. My mother. How did it go? Was it nice? I stared at that message for a long time. I typed back, "It was beautiful. Good night." And then I put my phone face down on my nightstand and let myself feel whatever was underneath all that composure, which turned out to be grief, mostly. Just grief. I started my job 3 weeks later. I was placed in a cardiac step-down unit at a regional hospital, not the biggest in the city, not the most glamorous, but it was mine and I worked hard for it. 12-hour shifts, rotating schedule, the particular rhythm of a floor that never fully sleeps. I was good at it. that sounds like bragging, and maybe it is, but I mean it in a specific way. I was good at the parts that don't show up in the performance metrics. I was good at sitting with a patient who was scared, good at explaining things twice, 3 times, in different words until the fear in someone's eyes shifted into something closer to understanding. My charge nurse told me 6 months in that I had the best patient satisfaction scores on the unit. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just nodded and kept showing up. My family and I settled into a kind of surface-level routine. Sunday dinners twice a month, phone calls that covered the same ground, my father's back, my brother's business, my mother's neighbor drama, without ever quite landing anywhere real. They asked about my job the way you ask about the weather. Conversationally. Without actually wanting details. My brother's cookouts became a recurring feature of family conversation. He'd expanded, apparently. Had a smoker big enough to do whole briskets, was thinking about catering, had a little following on social media. My parents talked about it with a specific brightness in their voices, this warmth that I recognized as pride and had never, not once, heard directed at me. I stopped going to the cookouts after the third one where my mother introduced me to someone as Marcus's sister. Not by my name, not as a nurse, just Marcus's sister. I am not Marcus's sister. I am a person. I have a name. My name is Lydia. 9 months into my job, I got a call from my cousin Bet, who is the family's unofficial information clearinghouse, meaning she knows everything and distributes it selectively, based on what she thinks you should know. "Have you heard about Marcus's catering thing?" she said. I said I'd heard he was expanding. "Yes. 3 people got sick after his pop-up last weekend," she said. "Like, really sick. One of them's a kid." I went very still. "How sick?" I said. Sick," Bet said. The mom posted about it on one of the neighborhood Facebook groups, said her kid had been vomiting since Saturday night and they couldn't get his fever down. I asked her to send me the post. She did. I read it 3 times. The child was 7 years old. The symptoms, onset timing, presentation, the specific quality of the illness as described by a terrified mother in a neighborhood Facebook group were consistent with foodborne illness. Possibly salmonella. Possibly something worse, depending on how the meat had been handled. I want to be clear about something. I am a nurse. Not a food safety inspector, not an epidemiologist, not a health department investigator. I do not have the authority to diagnose or investigate foodborne outbreaks. What I have is enough clinical training to know what those symptoms look like and enough professional experience to understand what they meant. They meant someone needed to report this. I didn't call Marcus right away. I should have. I know that now, and I knew it then, partially. But there's this thing that happens when the person at the center of a potential harm is someone you grew up with, someone whose name is on the same family tree as yours. You hesitate. You look for another explanation. You tell yourself maybe it was something else. Maybe the timing is coincidental. Maybe you're overreacting. I called my mother instead. "Marcus needs to stop the pop-ups," I said, "at minimum until he figures out what happened." My mother said, "What are you talking about?" I told her about the Facebook post. I told her about the child in the ER. She said, "Lydia, you don't know that's from Marcus's food. People get sick from all kinds of things. You're being dramatic. You're being dramatic." She has said that to me my entire life. Every time I tried to name something real, tried to bring something true into the room, that phrase arrived like a door being shut in my face. "You're being dramatic." I said, "Mom, I need you to take this seriously." She said, "I think you're jealous of your brother's success, and I think you're looking for reasons to make trouble." I hung up. I did not call Marcus. I thought about it all night, turned it over, tried to find an angle where calling him made sense. But I already knew how that conversation would go. He would tell me I didn't know what I was talking about. He would tell me I was jealous. He would use the same word my mother used. Dramatic. And then nothing would change except he'd have a reason to be angry at me. So I didn't call him. What I did instead was go to work the next morning and, before my shift started, walk down to the hospital's infection control office and talk to one of the epidemiology nurses I knew from a training we'd done together last fall. I told her what I knew. The Facebook post, the symptom timeline, the type of food service. I told her I was disclosing that the operator was my brother and that I was asking her what the right thing to do was. She looked at me for a moment and then she said, "You already know the answer to that." She was right. She walked me through the process: county health department, how to file a complaint, what information to include. She also told me, gently but clearly, that because of my family relationship to the operator, I would need to recuse myself from any further involvement once the report was filed. That was fine. That was the right call. I filed the report that afternoon. I want to tell you something about what it feels like to do the right thing when it costs you something. It doesn't feel like relief. Not immediately. It feels like stepping off a ledge into air and not yet knowing if there's ground below you. There's a specific kind of loneliness in it, a cold, clarifying loneliness that is different from the loneliness of being left out or overlooked. This is the loneliness of having chosen. I drove home from the hospital that day and I sat in my parked car in my apartment complex parking lot for probably 20 minutes. Just sat there. The sun was going down. Someone's kid was riding a bike in circles in the lot. Normal life happening around me like nothing had shifted and everything had shifted. My phone rang. Marcus, I didn't answer. It rang again. My mother, I didn't answer. I went inside and made dinner and ate it alone and watched something I don't even remember anymore. Just noise and light to fill the apartment and tried to sleep and mostly couldn't. The county health department moved faster than I expected. Within 4 days, they had contacted Marcus and requested documentation, temperature logs, sourcing records, handling procedures. Within a week, an inspector had visited the commissary kitchen he rented. What they found was not a single oversight. It was a pattern. Improper cooling temperatures for large cuts of meat. Cross-contamination risk between raw and cooked product. Missing HACCP records. A reach-in cooler running at a temperature that would fail any basic food safety standard. Marcus's catering operation was shut down pending compliance review. I learned all of this, not from any official source. I had, as required, completely removed myself from anything connected to the investigation. But from Bet, who called me sounding breathless. "Did you know about this?" she said. "I knew some things," I said. "I reported what I knew." Silence. "His whole business, Lydia. 2 people went to the ER," I said. "One of them was a kid." More silence. "Your mother is beside herself," Bet said. "I know," I said. "My mother called me 7 times over the next 3 days. I let all of them go to voicemail. On the 4th day, she sent a text that said, 'You destroyed your brother's business out of jealousy.' I don't know who raised you, but it wasn't me." I read it twice. Then I screenshotted it and texted it to exactly no one, because there was no one in my family I could send it to and have them see what I actually saw. No one who would read that message and understand what it meant that she wrote it, that she believed it, that jealousy was the story she needed it to be. I called Rosa instead. Rosa, who had walked into that pinning ceremony with me. Rosa, who by that point had become one of those rare people you meet in adulthood, who fills a space you didn't know had been empty. I read her the text. She was quiet for a second and then she said, "Okay, so now you know for sure." "Know what?" I said. "That you were right to do it." If she could believe that, she was never going to see you clearly anyway. Now you have confirmation, not just suspicion. I had to sit down on my kitchen floor when she said that, not because it was cruel, because it was exactly true. I did not reach out to my family. I did not write a letter explaining myself or defending my decision. I did not wait for an apology. I knew by then. I think I had known for a long time, but knowing something as a fact and knowing it in your body are 2 different things. That waiting for these particular people to see me clearly was a project with no end date. You can spend your whole life trying to make someone look at you, but you cannot make them look. I requested a transfer to a different unit at the hospital, not because of the case that was resolved and closed as far as I was concerned, but because I wanted a change. I ended up in a pediatric cardiac unit, which is brutal in its own ways and also the best work I have ever done. Something about being in that space, those small patients and their big-eyed parents who need someone to be steady, it returned something to me, a sense of purpose that was entirely mine. I changed my phone number. I did not send anyone the new one except Rosa, two other friends, and my grandmother, my father's mother, who is in her 80s and has always seen me the way I needed to be seen and does not deserve to lose contact with me just because her son forgot to. I did not legally change my name. But I started using my middle name, June, in my personal life, not to hide, not to escape, because Lydia June had always been there. All of it, and I wanted to inhabit all of it for the first time in a long time. Rosa calls me June now. It sounds right. Marcus's catering operation reopened, I was told, about 4 months later, after he completed a food handler certification course and brought his commissary kitchen up to code. I wish him nothing terrible. I mean that genuinely. I hope he passes his inspections. I hope he learns that the temperature danger zone is 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and I hope that knowledge becomes automatic, the way all critical knowledge should. I hope the families of the people who got sick are all right. The 7-year-old's mother had updated her Facebook post eventually. I had gone back to look once after the investigation closed. He had recovered fully. The post had over 200 comments. People were angry. People wanted answers. She wrote at the end, "My son is home and doing well. Please be careful about where you eat." I closed the tab and did not go back. People ask me sometimes, when I tell pieces of the story, whether I regret it, whether, knowing everything that followed, the silence, my mother's text, losing whatever fragile shape my family had been, I would still make the same call. And I have to be honest, I don't think regret is quite the right word for what I feel when I think about it. What I feel is closer to sadness. Sadness that it had to be a choice at all. Sadness that I had spent so many years trying to earn a seat at a table where the chairs were never really meant for me. But would I file that report again? Every single time. A 7-year-old was sick. 2 people went to the ER. My professional knowledge and my professional ethics existed before I was a daughter or a sister, and they will exist after. You cannot unlearn what I know. You cannot unknow what I know. You cannot unknow what I know. I became a nurse because of what I watched in my grandmother's hospital ward when I was 9 years old. I understood even then, at 9, that there is a specific kind of person who shows up when things fall apart, who brings knowledge into fear and steadiness into chaos. That's what I chose to be, and I am still choosing it. Every shift, every patient, every time I walk into a room where someone needs someone to be certain when nothing feels certain. My parents didn't come to my pinning ceremony. They were at a backyard cookout. And I walked across that stage anyway, with Rosa's arm in mine, and received that pin and became what I had always been becoming. Some things happen to you. Some things you build yourself, quietly over years in the spaces where no one is watching. This one was mine. Before I tell you the rest, whether there was ever a phone call, whether I ever opened the door even a little, let me ask you something. If you had been in my place, standing outside that auditorium, phone in hand, would you have answered when they finally called? What time is it where you are, and what would you have done? I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a mystical way. I'm not someone who believes the universe is keeping score and sending invoices. But I do believe that choices have weight, and that weight lands somewhere, eventually, on someone. Marcus made choices over a long period of time, small ones, mostly. Cutting corners on cooling times, skipping the temperature logs, telling himself it was fine, it had always been fine, nobody had gotten sick yet. Those weren't dramatic decisions. They were quiet ones, made in back kitchens and walk-in coolers when nobody was watching. But quiet choices accumulate. They build into something, and what they built, in his case, was a situation where a 7-year-old ended up sick in an emergency room. My parents made choices too, decades of them, choosing which child's milestones mattered. Choosing on a specific Tuesday morning to be in Riverside at a backyard cookout instead of downtown at a pinning ceremony. Those felt like small choices to them, I think, ordinary, unremarkable. But they accumulated too in me, into something I had to eventually reckon with, what I was willing to keep accepting and what I wasn't. And I made choices. I chose to go to nursing school when no one thought I should. I chose to pay for it myself when no one offered to help. I chose, on the hardest day of all of this, to file that report even knowing what it would cost me. That choice came from somewhere, from 4 years of clinical training, yes, but also from something older, something I built in myself out of necessity, because when you grow up being the one nobody fully sees, you either collapse inward or you develop a very clear internal compass. You learn to navigate by something other than approval. That's the thing about integrity that I didn't fully understand until I was sitting in my parked car that afternoon, phone ringing, not answering. Integrity isn't something you feel good about in the moment. It's not warm. It doesn't congratulate you. It's just this cold, steady thing that stays when everything easier has already left. Rosa understood that without me having to explain it. She's the kind of person who shows up with her arm linked through yours when the people who were supposed to show up didn't. I think about what she said. Now you have confirmation, not just suspicion, and I think that is one of the most clarifying things anyone has ever said to me. Because I had spent years carrying a suspicion that maybe I was the problem, maybe I wanted too much, maybe I was, as I'd been told so many times, dramatic. But the truth is that I wanted exactly as much as any person is entitled to want. To be seen. To be shown up for. To have the people who claim to love you act like your life matters to them. I didn't get that from my family, so I built it, slowly, imperfectly, from the people who actually chose to be there. From Rosa. From the colleagues who cheered when I got my scores. From the parents in the pediatric cardiac unit who look at me like I'm the steadiest thing in the room and for whom I try, every single shift, to actually be that. Lydia is still my name. June is also my name. I contain both, and I'm done apologizing for taking up the space I take up. What happened to me wasn't fair, but fairness and cause and effect are different things. The cause was years of being told I didn't matter enough. The effect was a woman who learned, the hard way and on her own terms, that she does. That's not a tragedy. That's an education.